I mean,
We have
that's not
never
true.
had a black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had a
The
Jewish
whole
president. Who
concept is
cares?
no taxation without. We have had a white male president.
I mean,
Five of them.
whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for
You do.
quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
Okay, so you've probably argued with someone who sounds like Ben Shapiro at Thanksgiving or in a comment section or with that one coworker. Here's the thing. I used to be one of those people. In high school, I listened to Ben Shapiro religiously, so I know how this rhetoric works from the inside. I can confidently say that there's a handful of moves these guys run over and over again, and once you see them, you can dismantle them. So today, I'll be breaking down this Jubilee video to see what it can teach us. I'm not trying to go all debate bro on you. My goal is simply to give you the tools you need to think clearly and speak compellingly so that the next time you sit down with that one friend or family member or coworker, they'll actually hear you.
My first claim is Kamala Harris's attempts to put DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center of her policies is destructive. How's it going, dude?
Morning.
Where do I get one of those hats?
Oh, my boy made it for me.
Nice.
First of all, we're standing on stolen indigenous Tongva land, right? This is
Are you moving anytime
indigenous
soon?
land. No, but
Why?
the fact of the matter is I'm born and raised California. We're talking
Yeah, but
about
it's stolen land, so why don't you
diversity,
give it back?
equity, and vision. We should.
So why don't
We
you?
absolutely
You
should.
could do it today, right now.
Great. We
do it.
should, but that's not my point.
Nice work. I'd start my videos with a land acknowledgement, but I don't want to dox myself. Seriously though, be honest. Even if you agree with Josh politically, this clip made you cringe. And there's a reason for that, because this is a totally performative claim. This move is designed to signal to the in-group. It's not designed to win over the audience, and certainly not for the benefit of the person you're debating. This is pure virtue signaling, I'm sorry. And you know how I know that? All Ben had to do to win here was to take Josh seriously, because he was never planning to give his house back to the Tongva. He just wanted to score some quick points. Now, why do normal people cringe at land acknowledgements? Why is it that Ben Shapiro makes Josh look like a clown in 2 sentences? Same reason. Both groups are picking up that you don't actually mean it. Bottom line, in an adversarial setting, these sorts of signifiers are a liability. You lose on optics and on rhetoric, and you're not even getting anything for it. The people who already agree with you didn't need the signaling. Now, this one was cut and dry, but next we're about to see someone who has an actual argument and still gets stomped. Let's watch.
Whoa, whoa. Man.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, how's it going?
Nice to meet you. So my opening question to you would be, why is that a destructive thing? Why is that a bad thing? There certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously, and that if you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences.
Okay, hold on. Did John just win? I mean, he asked Shapiro to concede that past injustices matter, and Shapiro agreed. That's progress, right? No. Shapiro weasels his way out. And I want to show you how, because this is a key move to understand when dealing with people like Ben.
If you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem is that when you design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you actually have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much? What is the corrective policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all?
You hear that? You have to measure out whether underperformance is due to these historic injustices, and if so, how much? What's the corrective policy? That sounds reasonable. It's also a description of literally any policy process ever. Like, yeah, obviously we need to make sure that the policy correctly targets the people it's supposed to target. But this is the move right here. Even though Shapiro technically conceded the principle, he knows that if he can get you bogged down in the minutia of the policy, he can stay on offense and pepper you with questions and make it look like you don't know what you're talking about. Quibbling over the details takes a lot of energy, and more importantly, you'll notice this creates a massive rhetorical asymmetry. John was arguing a principle. History created disadvantages, and we should use policy to address it. Shapiro was raising concrete concerns. Which disadvantages? How much? What policy? Measured how? These are not the same kinds of arguments, and they don't compete on equal terms. When you defend a principle, you have to defend it against every hypothetical your opponent can generate. When you contest claims, you just have to keep poking holes. So you're sitting there defending a claim, and Shapiro gets to take shot after shot on goal. And if you can't answer every single objection he generates, Shapiro will dismiss you as a pie-in-the-sky idealist. Well, actually, it would be great if everyone could have a unicorn, but unicorns do not exist. They don't exist. And you'll notice Shapiro runs this exact play over and over again in this debate. But that's not the only trick he has up his sleeve. Next, we're about to see someone who comes close to holding their own against Shapiro, but falls victim to one of his classic gambits. But if you understand this trick, it actually becomes one of Shapiro's biggest liabilities. But first, speaking of how DEI gets argued, I want to show you something that grinds my gears this week, and it's brought to you by Ground News, who's sponsoring this video. Ground News is an app and a website. I'm on the website right now reading about how IBM just settled with the DOJ for $17 million over their DEI hiring practices. The Trump administration's Civil Rights Fraud Initiative, yeah, that's a real thing, used a Civil War era statute to go after diversity programs in federal contracting. Now watch how this gets covered. CNN writes, IBM to pay $17 million in anti-DEI settlement. Gateway Pundit, which is about as right-wing as it gets. Woke fail. IBM accused of illegal DEI hiring, forced to pay $17 million. If you only read one of these, you walk away with a fundamentally different understanding of what just happened. If I scroll down to the ownership tracker, I can get an exact breakdown of who owns and funds the publications involved in this story. This is exactly why I use Ground News. They aggregate coverage from across the political spectrum and show you the biased breakdown in every story. For example, this story is being heavily covered by right-wing sources and mostly ignored by the left. Because here's the thing, if you want to argue about DEI or anything else for that matter, you need to know what the other side is actually reading. That's why I use Ground News to help me stay informed and prepared for political conversations. Right now, you can get 40% off the unlimited access Vantage plan. That brings the cost down to just $5 a month. Go to groundnews.com/Harper or scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description and the pinned comment to support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. All right, back to the coverage.
That was so nice, everybody. Thank you.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Sure.
So yeah, obviously culture matters, but Ben is using it in a very specific and sneaky way here. Watch.
What is the backing on this?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. Korean Americans can study a lot more than, for example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours that kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents.
So Ben is claiming that disparities between groups are caused not by historical circumstances or structural forces, don't be ridiculous, but by culture. And there's a very specific reason that Ben doesn't bother to interrogate how culture develops, because doing so would trap him between a rock and a hard place. Think about it. There's really two options here. Option one, culture comes from biology, the Nick Fuentes answer. Shapiro is smart enough not to cross that Rubicon, at least most of the time. Option two, culture is the accumulation of people responding to historical and material conditions. Who got which visa and who was excluded in which neighborhood and who was allowed to build wealth, which is, you'll notice, exactly the kind of disparity DEI is supposed to remedy. So culture isn't actually an explanation, it's a thought-terminating cliche, and it's designed not just to discredit ham-fisted and counterproductive DEI initiatives, but also the very idea that historical injustices can be analyzed and addressed. Shapiro stops at culture because if he goes one step further in either direction, he becomes a Klan member or he has to endorse leftist structural analysis. And here's the actionable thing I want you to take from this. Whenever somebody in a debate names an intermediate variable as a cause, culture, human nature, individual choice, whatever, don't argue on their terms. Get to the root. Now, Amanda actually almost does this.
But culture is acclimated over time. We have to take into account that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Asian Americans were given a certain type of reparations, which allowed them into the country, they were given visas. Mainly the individuals who were able to attain those were people with higher educations, which is why it may seem that Asian Americans within the country who come in typically with higher incomes as well as higher educational backgrounds, it may come off as that they are more studious than Latino Americans.
That's exactly the move. She just named a specific historical policy that created the cultural outcome Shapiro was pointing to. Asian Americans who came in through Post-Exclusion Act visa reforms were selected for high education, which partially explains why the studying patterns look the way they do. She's holding her ground right now. And then...
It's not their culture, per se. What you see within...
Is there any individual agency in here, or is it all historic circumstance?
Everything is based off of history. Everything acclimates. Everything is an accumulation of history.
So to take the single motherhood example, for example...
The way...
She flinched. She had him on a specific claim, and she gave it up to defend a principle. A principle which, by the way, she probably doesn't even hold. But the second Shapiro offered her the binary, structure versus agency, she took it. And the moment you buy into that false dichotomy, you lose. Because now you're defending everything is history, which is kind of a maximalist, crazy position, instead of defending this specific policy created this specific outcome, which is just true. So there's an offensive lesson and a defensive lesson here. Offensively, don't accept a half answer. Get to the root. Defensively, refuse false dichotomies. So putting it all together, that could look something like, yeah, of course people have agency, but let's not pretend that some people aren't swimming upstream while other people are in the darn lazy river, the lazy river. But anyway, I really want to drill in on that studying point, Ben. Where do these particular values come from? Tell me the mechanism. He cannot answer that question. By the way, if you want to take these techniques into your next argument, check out the Leftist Rhetoric Pocket Guide. This is a free ebook. I update it every time I cover new material in this series. That way, before family dinner or before your meeting with that one libertarian coworker, you can look it over and stay sharp. Once again, totally free, but there is an option to donate in proportion to how much value this channel has given you.
Yeah, like a jackrabbit. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Hi,
how's it going? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay, this next point is extremely critical. Open your eyes and ears for full spectrum coverage.
So, I kind of want to shift the conversation about DEI a little bit away from culture, because I don't know if that's necessarily like a helpful conversation to have. And I really want to talk more about representation. We are a very diverse country.
Mm-hmm.
Do you not think that our legislators should be representative of the overall population?
I don't see a way that you can have a quote unquote representative legislature with 435 members of Congress in a country of 340 million people.
Well, we don't have to do it systematically, but fundamentally, there is an issue with the fact that we are not fully represented. Like, the entire population is not represented.
I mean,
We have
that's not
never
true. We
had a
vote.
black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had a
The
Jewish
whole
president. Who
concept is
cares?
no taxation without. Well, we have had a white male president. We've had like 45 of them.
whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for
You do.
quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't have anything insightful to say about this section. I just thought it was funny and I wanted you to see it. Okay, on to the next.
My next claim is Kamala Harris's border policies will turn America into an unsafe and bankrupt nation.
This is one of the most frustrating exchanges for me personally because Mason gets so close to striking gold here and he lets it go. But it's a very instructive case study on how to hold your ground. Let's watch.
I really find it interesting how conservatives always like to talk about the response to certain behaviors instead of what the root cause is. When oftentimes United States foreign policy is what creates the destabilization of countries, which is why people try to come to places where they can't get economic benefit.
I'm not
I mean,
blaming anybody-
your employee, Matt Walsh, was kind of schooled on this with Ryan Grimm, where he talked about specifically Haitian policy, where the government of Haiti has been destabilized over and over again by Western imperial nations, so that those citizens are trying to flee something with political.
I mean,
So right off the bat, gotta give some love to my boy Mason. He's using a technique that I talk about all the time here, controlling the frame. So Shapiro opens the immigration discussion on his turf. The costs of illegal immigration. He has a whole prepared routine here, and 9 times out of 10, the leftist across from him does one of two things. They either argue the numbers, which is like wrestling with a pig, you both get dirty and the pig enjoys it, or they argue a principle. No human is illegal. And you've already seen what happens to people who lead with the principle in this video. This is where the whole facts don't care about your feelings thing comes from, by the way. You state a lofty principle and he makes you argue the specifics until it seems like you don't know what you're talking about. At which point you become just another impotent liberal with a head full of postgraduate ideas and zero ability to grapple with reality. So anyway, how do we avoid this trap? Well, Mason just showed us. Rather than arguing the numbers or the principle, Mason says, why are we having this argument? Why aren't we asking why these people are leaving in the first place? And just like that, the whole conversation is moved to Mason's terrain. This is frame control. This is frame contestation. When your opponent opens on their strongest ground, don't fight them there. Question the premise of the debate. And notice, he doesn't just say imperialism and wave his hands. He cites a specific example where Shapiro's own employee, Matt Walsh, got dismantled by Ryan Grimm on this exact topic.
Nobody thinks that it will benefit America to become more like Haiti.
Right. We don't want a marine invasion and occupation of the United States that constantly decapitates governments and takes the money out of the country. We wouldn't want to be like basically a colony that the entire West spends 200 years punishing after the Haitian Revolution.
I get that. I understand that, but also at a certain
We
point,
wouldn't want that. No, yes.
It's a concrete example backing up a structural claim. And this is the moment where Mason has Shapiro on the back foot. For about 6 seconds, the cool kids philosopher is playing defense. But then Mason gives it up.
The government of Haiti has been destabilized over and over again by Western imperial nations, so that those citizens are trying to flee something with political persecution.
Is it your contention that anytime there's a destabilized nation across the world, even if the United States had a hand in it, then we then have a moral obligation to take in every citizen of that country who wishes to flee?
No, I think that's a huge straw man. I'm not saying that every single person from a destabilized country needs to take refuge in the United States, but I think it's important to add that context. So you can understand why people are coming here.
That's a case for a different foreign policy. That's not a case for an immigration
the
policy.
idea
that
is
That's the moment Mason lost the frame. Now, Mason wasn't wrong, it was a straw man, but instead of pressing his advantage here, he clarifies his position. And the moment Mason goes into defense mode, rather than advancing his own argument, watch what Shapiro does.
That's a case for a different foreign policy. That's not a case for an immigration
the
policy.
idea
that
is
allows
people are
vast
coming
swaths of
in here
people
to mooch off of our emergency rooms or mooch off of our social services,
No, I don't think
which
that's
is just
true.
not true at all.
I mean, no,
that's
no,
your
that-
big contention
that is,
for
that
why
is
you're...
not, that is not my contention.
Okay,
My
I'll
contention
let you
is,
speak.
I'm not claiming that the intent of people is to mooch off the system. The result of people is that they may be a net draw on benefits rather than a net.
He says, well, that's a separate argument, and just kind of continues. And just like that, we're back on Shapiro's preferred ground. So, okay, you need to hold your frame. Shapiro shouldn't have been able to wiggle out of that one as easily as he did. But here's the deeper insight. Strawmen aren't just logical fallacies. Think of them as tactical retreats. When Shapiro strawmans you, he's telling you he doesn't want to engage with your actual point. So in that moment, you need to pursue hard. A better move here would look something like, no, that's a huge strawman. I'm not saying that every single person from a destabilized country needs to take refuge in the United States. What I'm saying is that if you care about immigration, you need to acknowledge the root cause. Why are they fleeing their homes in the first place? At the end of this video, we're gonna see someone who refuses to let Shapiro slip away. Stay tuned. But in the meantime, there are a few more clips I wanna show you.
Well, okay, we're gonna take this chair. Look at that.
Hey, Ben.
Like a bro, my friend. All right.
This next one is really interesting. On the surface, you may not see anything wrong with it, but I actually think this is the most damaging exchange in the entire video.
How's it going?
Let's break open
first
a beer or
question,
something.
can
Okay.
men get pregnant?
Men cannot get pregnant,
Okay, awesome. So,
definitionally.
definitionally, okay. What about the existence of trans men?
Before I show you this next clip, I need you to understand something. Ben Shapiro is not fundamentally a thinker or an activist or even a debater. He's a content producer, and he's been producing one specific moment over and over again for a decade. You've probably seen it. Lord knows I did in high school. Ben Shapiro destroys SJW with facts and logic. That's the business model that motivated his campus tours and built the Daily Wire and earned this nasally gifted kid his C-list celebrity status.
Like a bro, my friend.
The angry undergraduate sociology student, mousy brown hair, poking out of the roots of an at-home dye job, on the verge of a nervous breakdown before they can even take the microphone at a Young Americans for Liberty event. This is what made Ben Shapiro Ben Shapiro. I tell you this because Shane is about to walk into a trap Shapiro has spent 2 decades engineering. Every leftist needs to understand how this trap works, because if we don't, we'll keep falling into it. And every time we do, our side loses ground.
What about the existence? Do you mean women who believe that they are men? What are we talking about here? Women experiencing gender dysphoria?
So my other question is, do you benefit from white supremacy in any way, shape, or form?
I'm going to need more specifics on what you mean by white
Well, here, let me
supremacy.
give it to you then.
Sure, please.
So I'm a transgender man.
Okay.
I've experienced SA.
I'm not interested in what your genitalia are.
Clearly you are. I mean, it's all over everything you make, buddy. I'm sorry. I hate to say it to you, but
I think you can read on my face that I
obsession
radically
you
am
guys
not.
have.
I think you can read on my face that I radically am not. When we're talking about
No,
abortion,
I don't. I mean, you can present it here, but in most of the content that you have, you attack my community constantly. Why not focus on the economy itself? All of us are struggling, and you want to focus on trans people. You want to focus on a black woman when this is clearly a glass cliff situation. America's falling apart, and let's give it a woman, right? I mean, it's so funny to watch
You've been going
white
for-
supremacy just fall apart the way that it is, and you ride so hard. Because guess what? In other countries around the world, women are not having children. And why is it? Because of the patriarchy and all the violence that men perpetuate. And all of women have babies so that we can continue this capitalistic society that we have. Why are we doing that? What? I mean, why? Because you want to push white supremacy and because you want to make your check? It does great for you. Meanwhile, people like me have to live with the consequences of all of your rhetoric that you put on a daily basis. This guy's been accused of rape. Trump. In like court documents, and you're backing the guy. Like, the American idea, what we believe in as a country, is not what you're perpetuating. It's diversity. It's giving you tired, hungry, and poor. The Google phone you have in your pocket is because of all of
Everything Shane said is basically true. Shapiro and his lackeys have built their careers by using trans people as a political wedge, and it makes sense that Shane would be angry. If it felt satisfying for you to watch somebody totally take Ben Shapiro to task, I'm with you. But let's be honest. Does that clip feel good because Shane won? Or is it just cathartic to see someone vent their anger? Did that segment actually persuade anyone? Shane's not even engaging with Shapiro. This is just a lecture. The bottom line is emotional truth and rhetorical effectiveness are not the same thing. If your argument requires the audience to already agree with you for it to be impactful, it's not an argument. And here's what makes this so painful. Shane started with exactly the same opening Naima used. Very pointed questions designed to put Shapiro off balance. But Naima stuck with it, and it produced a clippable moment for her. Instead, Shane's heartfelt diatribe is going to get clipped up by the right. This footage is going to show up in compilation videos forever. There's a reason Ben just let Shane talk without interruption. And it's not because Ben Shapiro is shy, it's because Shane was giving Ben exactly what he wants. Some wokey yelling at him as he sits there smirking. One cathartic moment buys 10 years of right-wing recruitment material. And I need you to understand, that's not a metaphor. There are people whose entire job it is to find clips like this and convert them into political ammunition. Again, this isn't Shane's fault. The conservative media machine has spent 15 years or more dehumanizing transgender people in public, specifically so they could film the outbursts that result and then use those explosions as recruitment material and bait for the next round of dehumanization. It's a perfectly engineered feedback loop of pain. But unless you know how this trap works and stop walking into it, this isn't gonna end, because the people who built it certainly aren't gonna stop themselves. Now, while I may not entirely agree with Guy's politics, and we'll get to that in a moment, the rhetorical strategy here is very effective, so let's break it down.
Kamala Harris supports the bipartisan border bill that was negotiated by conservative Senator James Lankford and supported by Mitch McConnell. Do you not support that bill? And
I do not support that bill.
So what is your solution then?
Close the border. And
But
then
the border is closed right now. Do you agree?
The border is certainly not closed right now.
What do you mean? There's a small trickle of people coming over. The numbers are similar to the end of the Trump administration, no?
Well, now because of executive order, they have been reduced significantly. I think that if we were going to look at deportations, we obviously ought to tranche that out based on criminal record. We ought to tranche it out based on usefulness to the economy. I think we ought to look at each person individually and determine whether they ought to be deported or not.
So that is probably going to lead to a small trickle of people being kicked out of here. So that's not going to accomplish your goal.
Well, I mean, who said that my goal was to mass deport 20 million people all at once?
So you want 20 million undocumented immigrants to stay in America?
No, no, that is not what I'm saying. I fail to see how you got from, I would like to go through one by one in the same way that we do IRS tax forms for literally every American who pays taxes in the United States, and go through illegal immigrants and determine who ought to stay in the country and who not ought to stay in the country.
So what army is going to go over these 20 million people, and with what resources? Where are you going to detain them? How are you going to get them out of the country?
I mean, you'll detain them and you'll deport them, increasing the resources of ICE. The biggest problem with
with
regard
ICE,
to... Yes.
similar to the bill that was rejected by you and...
For the entire debate up to this point, Shapiro has been the one asking questions. He's been the prosecutor. Are you going to give the land back? How would you measure that? What's your source on that? Is it your contention that, aside from some rare moments, everyone else has been the defendant, justifying themselves? Guy refused to be the defendant. And from that moment on, Shapiro is doing something he spent his whole career avoiding, defending his own claims to a hostile questioner who knows the source material better than he does. There's a term for this in trial law, which I'm sure Mr. Shapiro is quite familiar with. It's called cross-examination. And the cardinal rule of cross-examination is never ask a question you don't already know the answer to, because the point of cross-examination is to pin the witness. You'll notice Guy didn't sit down and try to argue his values. He clearly knew the legislation, and he didn't let Shapiro gish-gallop his way out of it. And if you study the moments where somebody had success against Shapiro in this debate, they all have this in common. The winners interrogate, the losers explain. By the way, this isn't just for hostile debates where you're trying to beat your opponent and win over the audience. Even in a cordial discussion where you genuinely respect the other person and you just want them to see your point of view, it's still way more effective to ask them questions and probe their worldview than it is to shove your ideas down their throat. So questions are like 10 times more effective than statements. But there's one other thing we need to talk about here, because there's something kind of weird about watching Guy win this debate. This conversation is almost 2 years old at this point. It came out in 2024, right before the election. And at this point in time, if you'll recall, the Democratic Party had triangulated itself into a hardline immigration position because consultants told them that swing voters wanted to see toughness on the border.
Increasing the resources of ICE. The biggest problem with
with
regard to
ICE.
Now, in 2026, with masked federal agents, people in the streets, and abducting them from daycares, that position seems absurd. So even though Guy was rhetorically effective here, he's arguing that Kamala Harris would be tougher on immigration than Trump, which is a ludicrous position on so many levels. And I'm not pointing this out so I can thumb my nose at Guy. I think there's a lesson here for anyone with a political vision that extends beyond the focus group position of the moment, beyond winning the next election. Because when you're arguing for positions that you'll still believe in 5 years, bringing the receipts like Guy did is even more important. For example, Bernie Sanders may not be perfect, but at least he's consistent. You can dig up old footage of him from the 80s when he was the mayor of Burlington and see the same man you see on your TikTok feed today. That's earned him a lot of respect, even among people who would never identify as democratic socialist.
Oh, yeah, so many friends, so many friends.
Okay, we have one last clip here, and it synthesizes the entire debate brilliantly. Take a look.
I choose Tyler because he's been sitting behind me the whole time, and I feel bad for the dude. He's really wanted to talk, so let's have a conversation. You bet.
My claim is that Donald Trump did not commit to a peaceful transfer of power.
This has been Shapiro's worst exchange by far. I want to walk you through it slowly because every single thing we've learned in this video is happening at once in this clip. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's simple. I think Trump helped facilitate a fake electric scheme to override the election in 2020, to have Mike Pence not certify the election, and then allowed violence to happen at the Capitol. Donald Trump gave a speech for an hour and a half where he would say things like, "Fight like hell, they're stealing the country away from us." And then when people got to the Capitol, Donald Trump sat there for 3 hours and watched them. When his aides, his family, and everyone was telling him, put a stop to the violence, call them, tell them to go home. He did not. And I think that is an example of Trump not committing to the peaceful transfer of power. He was allowing the violence to happen when he could have stopped it.
Watch what Tyler does in his opening. Before he asks a single question, he does something incredibly smart. Notice he's not arguing yet. He's laying down the factual scaffolding. And watch how Shapiro responds.
Okay, so as far as allowing the violence to happen when he could have stopped it, I'm wondering exactly what he could have done given the fact that the Capitol Police were activated, in fact, pretty quickly in the middle of that debacle. As far as not committing to the peaceful transfer of power, do we mean verbally or in action? So I agree with you verbally. He never suggested that I am going to leave, and then he did. So, so I'm not sure actually how much we disagree on this matter. I thought that January 6th was terrible. I thought that his behavior between the election of November 2020 and January 6th was bad.
He concedes. That's the qualified concession move, the one we identified in the John segment as Shapiro's strongest defensive technique.
Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously.
And Tyler just burned it. He drew it out of Shapiro before he'd even zeroed in on the real point. Lesson number 1, force your opponent to use their best moves early on weaker terrain so that they have less ammunition when you bring the real point. This is chess. Tyler is playing chess. Okay, now for the kill shot.
I'm just wondering what sort of where do we disagree?
Yeah, well, I'll quote you, right? January 6th was the worst thing to happen since 9/11. You agree he verbally did not want to commit to the peaceful transfer of power. He tried to stop it, yet you are still saying that he should be the president of the United States.
Well, I mean, he did
right?
not.
That is your claim, though. He should be the president of the United States. He was informed at 2:14 p.m. that they were outside the Capitol saying, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." His aides went up to him and said, "They are saying this. You need to stop something." What does he do? At like 2:24 p.m., he says, "Mike Pence is a traitor," right? That was his tweet. Why do you think he would tweet that when he knew the violence was going on? They were saying, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence had to go into hiding. Why do you think he would tweet that at that moment?
Look at what just happened. Tyler didn't argue a principle. He didn't say Trump is a threat to democracy and try to defend that against every counterexample Shapiro could generate. He picked one fact pattern and he forced Shapiro to explain it. This is kind of like what Naima did. Concrete, factual questions demanding a specific answer.
Do you not agree that you were a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which you're discussing it.
This is guys' preparation. Tyler walked in knowing the exact timestamps. This is what Mason almost did with Haiti before he got derailed. And here's the part that makes me lose my mind. Watch what Shapiro does.
Why do you think he would tweet that at that moment?
I mean, I disagree with him tweeting with that.
I'm not saying you agree with it.
Why, so the question as to why Donald Trump does anything is a matter of,
but
public speculation.
That's the escape hatch. Shapiro is trying to bow out by claiming that he can't possibly know what Trump was thinking. In every other exchange in this video, the leftists either move on or get angry and accuse him of dodging, which just lets him look reasonable while they look unhinged. But Tyler does neither.
So the question as to why Donald Trump does anything is a matter of, public speculation.
You're a smart guy. I'm asking for your speculation.
Nicely done. He corners Shapiro so politely. I love that. This is what Amanda needed to do when Shapiro threw up a false dichotomy. Calmly pursue. Now Shapiro deploys his final move, the straw man. Same move he used on Mason. Try to force the leftists to defend a maximalist position that they didn't take. And watch what Tyler does.
If your question to me is whether I think that Donald Trump wanted Mike Pence murdered, I think the answer is no.
I'm not asking if he wanted him murdered. I'm saying, do you think he wanted the violence to stop?
Refusing the bait. Nice. Remember the Mason segment. Strawmen are a sign of weakness. But this next clip is where Tyler really hammers it home.
I'm not asking if he wanted him murdered. I'm saying, do you think he wanted the violence to stop?
Do I think he wanted? Yes.
Really? So his idea to stop the violence was saying Mike Pence is a traitor.
I think that he was in control of the forces that he was in control of, and the Capitol Police weren't in control of Nancy Pelosi.
What was he? He was the president of the United States.
Right, and the military was
instead
activated.
of saying, "Hey, get out," he said, "No, Mike Pence, you're a traitor." Okay. Why do you think he would say that at that moment?
Okay, I just expressed to you that I can't see into his head because I have a hard time.
Yeah, but you can make a guess, though, right?
Well, but can I ask you why you think he did that?
Why do I mean,
you said that he didn't want to be hung.
So this is what I think
he didn't want to be hanged, right?
Yes.
You said that.
Yeah,
so
I don't think he wanted to be hanged. I think that Donald Trump was indifferent to what happened in so far the violence Mike Pence. I think he wanted a lot of chaos. He wanted violence to delay the certification of the vote, which he was successful with, in hopes that there would be confusion and someone else might step up, like another senator, so they could allow to put forward the fake electorates. Because that was the plan. That was in Greensboro's plan to do that, and that was the whole idea. So yes, Donald Trump was okay with the violence because he did not want the certification to happen. And in fact, for the first time in American history, he delayed it. And to me, it's like, Ben, I really like you, but I think there's a lot of attributes that I like about you, especially your American values. That is the antithesis of American values. Allowing that to happen, wanting that to happen, and then, yeah.
Okay, so I think that Donald Trump obviously should have done more. I agree with you. He should have done more on January 6th. I think that he shouldn't have tweeted that about Mike Pence. I disagreed with what he was saying about Mike Pence's in the entire electoral scheme between November and January. As far as not committing to the peaceful transfer of power, again, what I will say is that the legal transfer of power did in fact take place. He did not, in fact, initiate a militia to storm the Capitol of the United States.
Trump's will.
Okay, but
that's the issue. I agree. It happened because of the guardrails of democracy, but Donald Trump did not want it to stand.
Okay.
Do you agree that Donald Trump did not want that election to be certified?
I mean, sure.
There it is. He just conceded. Everything after this is fluff. Tyler didn't just argue that Trump tried to overturn the election. He made Shapiro say it. This is the whole video in a nutshell. Tyler interrogated. He knew the facts. He refused to flinch. And most importantly, he actually extracted the concession instead of just asserting a conclusion. In short, he treated Shapiro the way Shapiro treats everyone else. And Shapiro was out of his depth because he's not used to playing defense. Once again, every loser in this video defended a principle. Every winner contested a claim. That's the master key. Okay, so now you know how to lead the conversation, you know how to pin your opponent with evidence, you know how to shift the frame and refuse a straw man. You can take all this into your next argument with the conservative coworker, your uncle, the guy at the bar, wherever, and you can win that conversation. But it won't be enough. I'll be honest, you can become the best communicator in your zip code. You can master every move in this video, and the person you're arguing with is still gonna wake up tomorrow morning, put in their earbuds, and listen to 3 hours of Ben Shapiro on the way to work. They're gonna scroll TikTok and get Charlie Kirk clips. Then they're gonna put on Joe Rogan in the gym. You get them for one conversation, the right has a 24/7 propaganda drip feed in their ear. These days, the narrative is decided by whoever controls the ambient information environment. And right now, that's not us, not even close. So how do we build the media apparatus that makes individual persuasion stick? How does the left stop bringing a knife to a satellite broadcasting fight? Well, lucky you, I made a whole video about it. It lays out what's wrong with our current media strategy, what the right has built that we haven't, and what I think we need to do about it, including a project I'm working on to solve exactly this problem. It's on screen right now and in the description of this video. Give it a look. We're not done here. Until next time, a better world is possible.